Honourable Speaker, this is my statement regarding what we are going to do on provincial councils. I also want to make a second statement regarding the steps we have taken to meet the concerns of the Tamil MPs of North and the East so that we could move towards reconciliation. Honourable Speaker, it's my sincere intention to progress without any political motivation, addressing the issues faced by the Tamil people in the North and East in order to secure much needed sustainable national reconciliation in the country. Reconciliation undoubtedly is an indispensable factor for Sri Lanka's own development. My recent meeting with Tamil parliamentarians representing the North and Eastern provinces was premised on this aspect. Subsequent to this meeting, I believe it's important to keep the members of this august House informed of the matters discussed, as it forms the basis of the proposed trajectory the government would seek to pursue in this regard. In this context, continued action on the relevant issues are ensued to contribute towards national reconciliation, which I will now seek to outline. Anti-terrorism bill, following the discussions of the suggested amendments to the bill, it to be presented to the Cabinet for approval. Subsequently, to appropriate, the bill will be, subsequent to that, the bill will be re-gazetted, and any person can then petition the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will have the last say as regards the provisions of the bill. Anti-corruption bill, I am pleased that the anti-corruption bill was passed in Parliament the last 2 months with amendments proposed by the Supreme Court in the determination and the other stakeholders, but without a vote, it has already been gazetted. Truth-seeking mechanism and the bill. The interim secretariat for the truth-seeking mechanism has been established and a Director General has been appointed. In addition, 3 divisions have been established covering legal and policy, public relations and information technology. Applications have been sought for key staff positions for the operationalization of the Secretariat, particularly for stakeholders, consultation, preparations of drafting guidelines and policies, until the formal mechanism could commence following relevant laws being enacted. Civil society stakeholder consultations, including the UN agencies, are continuing, and when exhausted, Cabinet approval will be sought and processed to become a legal framework. The Office for the National Unity and Reconciliation Bill, ONU. ONU draft law has been submitted to the Attorney General for the certification of constitutionality, which will subsequently be presented to Parliament. Additionally, the National Action Plan on Reconciliation drafted by ONU will be presented to the Cabinet in the near future. Office for Reparations, at present payments of monetary relief have been granted for 203 cases of missing persons from the Northeast conflict amounting to rupees 40 million as of July 2023. The process is continuing. Office of Missing Persons OMP, I reiterate the need to uphold justice for the people of the North and East. Of the 21,374 complaints received by the OMP, investigations into 3,462 cases have been completed at present. Investigations are progressing for the remaining complaints, and this process could get accelerated following the truth-seeking mechanism being fully operationalized. It would now be appropriate for those seeking particulars of missing persons to submit detailed information to the Interim Secretariat. I tabled the document containing the relevant information as Annex 1. OMP has commenced tracking missing persons. Further action is being taken to expedite the data entering process in order for its completion within 3 months. The issuance of certificates of absence is being expedited. The OMP and the AG's department are working on a case handling policy and have drafted guidelines focusing on effective management of complaints to the previous Commission and the OMP. Endorsement for the guidelines will be sought from the Cabinet. Further, OMP with 10 new panels totaling 24 are expected to be in operation from August and has planned to have a resource team per district for referral services. Members of Parliament are free to take up relevant issues with the officers of Office of the Reparations and Missing Persons. The OMP has already outlined this time frame in relation to their scope of work. Granting presidential pardon to prisoners involved in LTT activities. Prisoners are under the 3 categories of demand prisoners, numbering 21. Prisoners imposed with death sentence, 3, and those imposed with other sentences, 22. It has been decided to consider only the last 2 categories of prisoners for being granted presidential pardon in terms of Article 34(1) of the Constitution. In this context, considering the recommendations of the Honourable Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitution Reform, presidential approval has been granted to remit the balance sentence and release 11 of the prisoners under the last category. Establishment of the National Land Commission. Steps have been taken to expedite the establishment of the National Land Commission and the National Land Utilization Policy. A draft National Land Commission Amendment Law has been prepared and is being further studied for formulating a policy pertaining to the alienation of state land. The Land Utilization Policy Act is also expected to be in place by September for the NLC to be guided in their functions. The composition of the NLC would be amended to include 9 representatives from the provinces and 12 government officials. Resolution on land matters. It may be recalled that an injunction order has been obtained from the Supreme Court in 2020 on the release of residual forest lands by a special committee. Subsequently, following discussions in May this year, the possibility of demarcating forests and wildlife conservation areas based on the 1985 land use maps were requested to be examined. Consequently, a cabinet memorandum on this issue was submitted and approval was obtained to enforce the release of such forest land by interministerial committee. The withdrawal of the original interim order is being processed. In the meantime, a database has been evolved for focusing on the said land use map, current land use patterns, and the proposals of the divisional secretaries related to lands managed by the Forest Department in all districts of North and East. Maps containing information related to the districts have been made available for viewing by the members of Parliament in the relevant districts, secretariats, for a period of 2 months. I table the list of contact details of the relevant officials for this purpose. That is Annexure 2. The proposals presented at the divisional secretariat level are to be considered by the interministerial committee following the legal proceedings on the withdrawal of the original interim order. A committee chaired by the Secretary to the President will examine and facilitate matters relating to land. So issues could be taken up with that committee. A national plan for archaeology. The Department of Archaeology and the Central Cultural Fund have been informed that land demarcation excavation across the country should be done according to the national plan. The Director General of Archaeology has been instructed to prioritize and plan excavation work, identification of sites, and the manner in which they should be executed. An action plan will be presented by the Archaeological Department for the activities related to identification of the areas to be conserved and no proper acquisition to take place. Roadmap for the issuance of all-country passport for Sri Lankans living in rehabilitation camps in South India. The Department of Immigration and Immigration has received a list of 2,678 Sri Lankans living in South Indian rehabilitation camps. Of the aforesaid number, those with both Sri Lankan birth certificates and national ID cards can be issued all-country passports. The timelines for the issuance of said document span 2 to 4 weeks. A considered decision would be needed to be taken with regard to issuance of all-country passport to those Sri Lankans living in rehabilitation camps in South India. Resettlement internally displaced persons in the North and East provinces. The Presidential Secretariat, Northern Province Coordinating Office has been established to assist the IDPs who have been affected due to the North and East conflict. As you are aware, people who were internally displaced in the North and East were accommodated in welfare centers or been living with their friends and relatives. After the restoration of normalcy, they have largely returned to their places of origin. Following the resettlement of majority of people with housing and livelihood support, its current status in the North and Eastern province is hereby tabled as Annexure 3. Action continues to resettle IDP families in the Northern and Eastern provinces. Of the 5 districts in the northern province, resettlement IB remains only in Jaffna and Kilinochchi districts. In Jaffna, there are 15 welfare centers with a total of 136 families and 2,175 families with friends and relations. There are no IDP families living in welfare centers in Kilinochchi. However, 182 families remain with their friends and relatives in the peninsula and 177 in Pachela People Division. In the eastern province, IDPs are present only in Trincomalee and Ampara districts, and they live with friends and relatives, and there are no welfare camps in this province. Particular attention has to be given to resolving problems associated with displaced persons resettlement, which also requires releasing privately held lands for public use. I have tasked the officials to take immediate actions to settle these issues by devising effective mechanisms for their resolution. Lands to be released by Armed Forces Northern Province. Of the total land area in Jaffna amounting to approximately 250,283 acres, the occupation by the security forces and police in 2009 was 26,812 acres. Presently, 90 to 92% of the land occupied by the security forces and police in 2009 have been released from time to time. Accordingly, 22,990 acres, comprising 817 acres of state and 22,100 acres of private land have been released. The current extent of occupied land by the security forces and the police is 3,756 acres, of which 860 and 2,892 acres are respectively state and privately owned. Further release of the land is envisaged under the categories of 1. Land for immediate release compromises 1.4 acres in Jaffna, 13 acres in Kilinochchi, and 20 acres in Mullaitivu as identified by the Army and Navy. 2. Army has earmarked 53 acres in Jaffna district to be released in 3 to 6 months' time. 3. A land strip of approximately 290 acres from the Security Force Army Cantonment Palali has been identified to be released temporarily for specific purposes including agricultural and seasonal crops. 4. Regarding lands that cannot be presently released, a study is being carried out in this regard on the instructions of the Army Commander to ascertain the possibility of further freeing up of land in the northern province. I am aware that this is an area of contention for the northern population. Therefore, we will continue to seek ways and means to release as far as possible the military-occupied land in that province. I would also like to say in regard to what I have mentioned here, the steps we are taking, there will be certain matters which MPs from those areas would like to raise, especially they may suggest different timelines, some amendments. So I have asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Justice to deal with all those requests. So I would request you all to take any issues on that matter with the two ministers. Development plans on North and East. It's imperative to create extensive and practicable plans to develop the northern and eastern provinces, anticipating that the renewable energy could meet 70% of the country's national electricity needs by 2030. One of the key objectives of both northern and eastern development plan is to harness the region's renewable energy potential through the production of green hydrogen and green ammonia using innovative technologies. This strategy aims to attract investment and could transform the ports of Colombo and Trincomalee as hubs for export of green hydrogen. Punareen is being earmarked to be developed as the main town for this purpose. We have already taken steps on creating a conducive environment for the investment and export of solar and wind power, culminating in a memorandum of understanding with India to facilitate collaborative efforts in this area. Adani Group has come forward to invest in the renewable energy sector of Sri Lanka. I believe that this collaborative approach would lead to substantial growth in this area. Additionally, the Water to the North program compromised the development of various waterways. In this context, the government has already approved the project for Punakareen Tank, and Malwatu has been put in the special list of priority list of irrigation works. Talks are presently continuing on the river for Jaffna, which should bring fresh water to the Jaffna Lagoon and increase the capacity of the Irinamadu tank. The small tanks renewal project is important to be accomplished. In fact, this project will give rise to developing the agriculture and solar energy sectors in the northern province. In addition to this, the Economic Subcommittee of Cabinet is today considering 2 cabinet papers, one by the Minister of Irrigation, other by the Minister of Water Supply, to look at the development of water supplies to the, for urban use in the Jaffna Peninsula, as well as developing some of the other projects like Parangiaru. So there will be a committee chaired by my advisor, Dr. Samaratunga, to look at these plans and to make a combined plan. It is also essential to upgrade air and sea connectivity in the north. The development of the KKS harbour, Vaunia and Palali airports, and the ferry service connecting the northern province to South India are facilities which have been earmarked. The establishment of investment promotion zones in KKS, Parantan and Mahankulam are being worked towards. I will get the BOI to take these over. We also have plans for the development of tourist attractions in Jaffna and Mannar through a tourist cruise project around Mannar Fort, Kankasanture Port, the islands and Vedamarachi. Under an agriculture modernization program, we will seek to promote coconut cultivation in Vanni. Jaffna being a home to be a seat of excellence in higher education, which university would lend to developing it as a university city. Additionally, lands has been identified in KKS for the establishment of a campus under the aegis of the SLIIT. Similar plans for developing the eastern province are progressing, with Trincomalee being the core. India's assistance as our closest neighbor in implementing the Trincomalee district development project is of immense value to Sri Lanka. The ongoing cooperation in the development of Trincomalee tank farms and the Indian agreements to further enhance Trincomalee as a national and regional hub of industry, energy and economic activity is a field for developing further mutually beneficial cooperation. The eastern province plays an important role in naval affairs, and Trincomalee should be made into a leading strategic port. It is important that we work together with India when developing the eastern province port by having discussions on several programs in that region. Further, we cannot limit the economic activities of this port solely to the Trincomalee district. This should be connected with the cities of Anuradhapura, Vaunia and Dambul, especially when the districts of Vanni, the eastern and north central provinces are responsible for the bulk of agricultural production. Since India has a lead to develop industries in the provinces, an industrial zone should be created. The port, therefore, will also be connected, and we are planning to establish a joint task force for this purpose. From an economic point of view, the eastern province has much to offer the tourism industry. In particular, there is a cultural triangle of Anuradhapura, Polonnaru and Dambulla, which is in close proximity to eastern province and could be a natural route for enhanced visits by tourists to the beach-fronted cities of Batticaloa, Arugam Bay and Trincomalee. Cabinet also approved Subana Jurong to cover planning from Verugallaru to Arugam Bay for tourism purposes. Cruise tourism initiative could also be a part of this development plan. The fisheries, agriculture and animal husbandry sectors are well poised for modernization in the eastern province. In this context, the opening of land systems A and B of the Mahaveli Right Bank will provide much needed impetus for enhancing agriculture pursuits. I hope that some of the honourable members of Parliament who continue a misplaced refrain of the government purportedly selling out the country to a third party will now constructively understand that no country can progress alone. That too, especially in instance of nations emerging from an unprecedented economic crisis, as has been the experience of Sri Lanka. It must be understood that engaging in a robust relationship with our closest neighbour India would undoubtedly strengthen our ability towards ensuring mutually beneficial cooperation. You have my assurance that I will not engage in initiatives inimical to the sovereignty and integrity of this country. In the same manner, I urge all of you for constructive engagement in our quest for national reconciliation, considering that the interests of the people is the bedrock of our country's development.